Chapter 8. Thank you. Footnote: this and the following 2 chapters are narrated by Anastasia's grandfather. When little Anastasia was born, and after this tiny infant, who had not yet learnt to walk, was left all alone without any parents, the fiery sphere began to put in an occasional appearance beside her. My father, along with the other priests, knew about a great many natural phenomena that your scientists today consider mysterious and unexplainable. Yet he could still not account for the power of this fiery sphere. Its unfathomable energy could momentarily dissipate in space in the form of tiny sparks, or just as quickly gather itself together into a single whole. A delicate tongue of fiery light bursting from the sphere could instantaneously pulverize a huge rock or stone. The same tongue of light was also capable of tenderly touching an insect's legs as it crawled along the petal of a flower without causing any harm. But the main, most explicable part of the mystery was how this cluster of tremendous energy reacted to the feelings and desires of little Anastasia. That meant it had feelings, and thought besides. Thought, in the complete sense of the word, is native only to man. But this fiery sphere was not man. Then who was this? How could it possess feelings which belong only to man? Where did it acquire such tremendous power and might? I told you, and I described this in your book, in Book 2, Chapter 27, The Anomaly, how it changed the Earth's gravitational field in a single spot when Anastasia was learning to walk. Thousands of little tongues of light emanated from it, combing the little girl's golden hair. Father had an idea about what kind of forces could have produced this fiery, mighty, and thinking sphere, but he never spoke it aloud. Supposition requires proof. When little Anastasia was a little older, we overheard her talking with the sphere. Or rather, she was the one who did all the talking. The sphere never uttered words. It only reacted to the child's words through its actions. When Father asked Anastasia about the sphere, she gave only a very brief answer. I would call it good. Her answer was insufficient for my father, but he didn't speak with her again about the sphere. Not back then, nor over the years since. From that original answer, it was clear that Anastasia had no desire to give a definition either to the fiery sphere itself or to its actions. Most probably she perceived it through her feelings, but my father, for some reason, was anxious to define the phenomenon. From the time the sphere first appeared, Father stopped participating in the priest's affairs and concentrated his attention on solving the mystery. The priests know the mechanisms for confirming a hypothesis or overturning their own hypotheses. To this end, it is necessary to publicize the phenomenon with a highly accurate report and await people's reactions and opinions. Mind you, these people should not be asked or instructed to express their opinions. Definitions must arise freely, on the level of feelings and not just intellect, in order to be as accurate as possible. So, at my father's request, I told you about Anastasia's childhood, including the story of her communication with the mysterious phenomenon. You wrote about this in your book without distorting what you heard, and, most significantly, you did not express any opinions of your own. We looked forward with some excitement to hearing your reader's reaction. It came very quickly, expressed not in the usual things people say, but in emotional bursts of feeling. People said or wrote what my father had supposed for many years, but never spoke aloud, thoughts that he had hid from the other priests. You published poetry from readers who wrote not because somebody had asked them to, but straight from the heart. Let me remind you of how one of these poems start off. On her birthday, God appeared to his beloved little Nastenka. Footnote, Nastenka, a common diminutive variant of Anastasia. Father's guess had been confirmed. The fiery sphere which communicated from time to time with Anastasia is none other than a representative form of God. God has many representative forms. Each blade of grass is a manifestation of his thoughts. But of all the many elements comprising God's representation, the sphere presented itself if not as the main one, certainly as one of the most majestic and concentrated forms, including even the energy of both intelligence and feelings. And then one day, this happened after you had written your first 5 books. After the publication of her words, or rather, dark space was penetrated by what seemed like a fiery sword, an emotional outburst captured in her words. Prepare yourself, all wickedness and evil-mindedness, to leave the earth behind and fall upon me, quoted from Book 3, Chapter 24, Who Are You, Anastasia? From Anastasia's lips, these words go far beyond the meaning of just the words. You, Vladimir, along with many others, have had the opportunity a number of times to see that for yourself. And the wickedness began to attack Anastasia with an invisible energy. The white circles started appearing, bleaching the grass all around. It even happened sometimes that Anastasia would lose consciousness momentarily, and we did not know how to help her. Our little granddaughter did not ask us for help, and because she did not ask, that meant unquestionably that this was something that she had to work out all on her own. More recently, however, we began to notice these attacks on her getting more and more severe. It was as though evil were simply agonizing to carry out these final attacks. But our granddaughter's tenacity was growing at the same time. Lately, the routine blows have simply caused her to give a shudder and head for the lake shore. Somehow, the lake water has been able to quickly restore her strength. After splashing and diving in the water, she has come out at full strength as before. On one particular day, we noticed Anastasia heading for the lake after one of the usual blows, but she was treading very carefully. When she stopped to lean against a cedar trunk and rest, Father said with some alarm, "Today our granddaughter is having a particularly difficult challenge to handle. It has really been hard on her. Look, and you will see some gray strands in her golden hair." Then we saw Anastasia push off from the trunk, take one step and then another in the direction of the lake. Then she stumbled and stopped once more. It was at this point that the fiery sphere appeared from space, right in front of her. But this time its lightning flashes were changing colors, as though volcanic ashes were seething inside of it. Then all of a sudden it would look as though fierce fiery arrows were piercing through an invisible protective shield, floods of them dashing out and disappearing into space. But the sphere was not decreasing, but increasing in size, while the diverse energies inside it were condensing and seething with ever greater intensity. The sphere itself was not suspended in space, but contracted and expanded like a heart. Then all at once it fell still, as though trying to make a decision. 1,000 and thousands of lightning trills of energy dashed out in Anastasia's direction. At just what point this sinking girl managed to raise her hand, Father and I failed to detect, even though we were watching the whole event, trying not to blink. We knew what this gesture meant. She was shielding herself from the lightning trills directed at her. But why? At that time, we still weren't in a position to understand. But one thing was clear. The fiery sphere, through its energy, was capable of fully restoring her strength. Not only that, but it could also endow Anastasia with fresh energy, whereby outward attacks could no longer hold any terror for our granddaughter. But why did she decide to act on her own? The tongues of fire extended in her direction quivered, but they did not touch Anastasia, standing there with her hand raised. They either disappeared in the sphere, which was still raging with a tremendous energy, or dashed out once more, reaching out in her direction, but, as before, not touching her. Then all at once, with slow and tender words, she addressed the fiery sphere and its tongues of light. I implore you now to contain the bursts of your energy. Do not touch me. I can restore my strength in your lake as before. I just need to make it to the shore. In an instant, the sphere gathered up all its quivering tongues of light from all around and kept pulsating like a heart. It swept upward with a flash. It seemingly cracked asunder and then contracted. Its myriad tongues made a dash for the ground, touching everything on the path leading to the lake from Anastasia's feet. Another vision arose. The path began to sparkle with millions of pulsating colors of light, making a multicolored rainbow arc over the path leading to the lake from Anastasia's feet. It was a wondrous sight indeed. Anastasia's pathway now lay through a triumphal arc. She took a step, but to one side. She did not follow the route marked out for her by the fiery sphere. She slowly attained the shore and dived in, then resurfaced and simply lay in the water with outstretched arms. Then she started splashing about. Her strength had returned. Anastasia's behavior in relation to this fiery sphere, which was really in relation to God, was beyond our comprehension. But what happened next is comparable to a turning point in the consciousness of all of mankind, or to a change of balance in the energies of the universe. What happened next was, throwing on a little dress over her still wet body, she carefully smoothed out its folds, straightened her hair, then pressed her hands to her breast and began speaking out into space. My Father, you are present everywhere. I am your daughter, amidst your perfect creations. I must put an end to the dispute among the entities of the universe as to whether your creations are perfect, or whether they might be flawed. My Father, you are present everywhere. You have fulfilled my request and not touched me. None of them will now say that paradise will return to the earth only when God corrects his imperfect creations. Imperfect. There is nothing requiring your correction. You created all right from the start, in perfection. My Father, present everywhere. I am not alone. In all corners of the earth, there are sons and daughters of your own, and they have mighty aspirations. They will restore the earth to the marvelous flowering of its pristine creation. Original, pristine creation. My Father, present everywhere, we are your sons and daughters. We are created by you. We are perfection. And now we shall see. Now we shall show everyone what we can do. And may you be delighted by our actions. When Anastasia uttered these words and then fell silent, the fiery sphere, which had been resting high above, made a dash for the ground. About 3 meters from Anastasia's feet, it dispersed into millions of tiny sparks all around, and then in an instant gathered itself back together into a single whole. Only this whole, the single whole, was no longer a fiery sphere. There in front of Anastasia stood a child of, in earth terms, about 7 years. It is difficult to say whether it was a boy or a girl. The child's shoulders were covered by a fabric with a pale bluish-purple sheen that looked as though it were made out of mist itself. The child's hair fell around his shoulders. The expression on the child's face was one of intelligence, confidence, and grace. Rather, the expression on the child's face was impossible to convey in words. It could only be described in terms of the feelings which overflowed our souls. The young child stood barefoot on the grass, without trampling even a single blade. Anastasia knelt to the ground in front of him, then sat down on the grass, her eyes fixed on his extraordinary face. It seemed that in the very next second, he and she would embrace, but this did not happen. The child smiled at Anastasia. With a careful utterance of each sound, he said, "Thank you, sons and daughters, for your aspirations." Then, as he dissipated into space, the fiery sphere once more appeared high above, glistening with a joyful light of the like nobody had ever seen before. It made several circles over the lake, and for 5 minutes or so, drops of warm rain soothed everything growing around, as well as the smooth surface of the lake. The moisture was invigorating. A few drops fell on my arm without rolling off. Instead, they dissolved in filling my body with a luxuriant bliss. My father is always unflappable in situations like this, in complete control of his emotions. But this time even he was shaken. He walked through the taiga as though he could no longer feel his body, and I followed. He walked for several hours and then turned to speak to me. A tiny tear was rolling down his cheek. As one of the high priests, he was not susceptible to such emotion. But I saw his tears. Father said quietly and confidently, "She did it." Anastasia has brought people across the dark forces window of time. The seeds of happy and joyful aspirations will now be scattered over the whole earth. Then Father had a long and animated conversation with me. He was not surprised by the actions of the sphere, or by the fact that one of God's representative forms, perhaps his main manifestation, had appeared to Anastasia in the person of a child. My father was a priest, and not just a simple priest either. He had the ability to discern what was most important in visible occurrences. And it wasn't at all the vision itself that interested him. The most important thing was the appearance of a thought in space. The thought produced by Anastasia had not been heard since the time of creation, nor reflected in a single religious or scientific treatise. Utterly simple and yet at the same time extraordinarily exalted, it has turned the treatises we know into naive musings which had nothing in common with the divine essence. Anastasia had imbued human consciousness with the concept of God, which man had been missing all these years. What did it consist of?